Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Cognitive Linguistics, our new course, and this is our first lecture in this semester. Our today's topic is origin of cognitive linguistics. In this lecture, we will see some of the important features of origin of cognitive linguistics. But before that, let's see what cognitive linguistics is. Cognitive linguistics is an interdisciplinary branch of linguistics which combines knowledge and research from three areas, including cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, and linguistics. Linguistics is the scientific study of language, which involves the analysis of language form, language meaning, and language in context. And traditionally, human language is analyzed by observing an interplay between sound and meaning in linguistics. The second thing, cognitive psychology, it is a scientific study of mental processes such as attention, language use, memory, perception, problem solving, creativity, and thinking. And the third area, neuropsychology, that is a branch of psychology which is concerned with how the brain and the rest of the nervous system influence a person's cognition and behaviors. More importantly, professionals of this branch of psychology, they often focus on how injuries or illnesses of the brain affect or influence a person's cognition and behavior. Models and theoretical accounts of cognitive linguistics are considered as psychologically real, and research in cognitive linguistics aims to help understand cognition in general and is seen as a road into the human mind. There has been a scientific and terminological controversy around the label cognitive linguistics, and there is no consensus on what specifically is meant with the term cognitive linguistics. The roots of cognitive linguistics are in Noam Chomsky's 1957 critical review of B.F. Skinner's verbal behavior. Verbal behavior is a 1957 book by psychologist Skinner, in which he describes what he calls verbal behavior, or what was traditionally called linguistics. The study of behavior assumes that behavior is either a reflex evoked by the pairing of certain antecedent stimuli in the environment, or a consequence of that individual's history, including especially reinforcement and punishment contingencies, together with the individual's current motivational state and controlling stimuli. In philosophy, empiricism is a theory which states that knowledge comes only or primarily from sensory experience. And in psychology, mentalism refers to those branches of study that concentrate on perception and thought processes. For example, mental imagery, consciousness, and cognition. Chomsky's rejection of behavioral psychology and his subsequent anti-behaviorist activity helped bring about a shift of focus from empiricism to mentalism in psychology under the new concepts of cognitive psychology and cognitive science. Cognitive psychology is a scientific study of mental processes like attention, language use, memory, perception, problem solving, creativity, and thinking. And cognitive science is the interdisciplinary scientific study of mind and its processes. So the cognitive science examines the nature, the tasks, and the functions of cognition in a broader sense. And the cognitive scientists, they study intelligence and behavior with a focus on how nervous systems represent, process, and transform information. Chomsky considered linguistics as a subfield of cognitive science in the 1970s, but he called his model transformational or generative grammar. Having been engaged with Chomsky in the linguistic wars, George Lakoff united in the early 1980s with Ronald Langacker and other advocates of new Darwinian linguistics in a so-called Lakoff-Langacker agreement. It is suggested that they picked the name cognitive linguistics for their new framework to undermine the reputation of generative grammar by Chomsky. Consequently, there are three competing approaches that today consider themselves as true representatives of cognitive linguistics. One is the Lakoffian-Langackerian brand with capitalized initials in cognitive linguistics, C and L. The second is generative grammar, while the third approach is proposed by scholars whose work falls outside the scope of the other two. They argue that cognitive linguistics should not be taken as the name of a specific selective framework, but as a whole field of scientific research that is assessed by its evidential rather than theoretical value. So they named it Integrative Cognitive Linguistics. So let's see these three approaches one by one. Generative grammar functions as a source of hypotheses about language computation in the mind and brain. It is also argued to be the study of the cognitive neuroscience of language, and it also studies behavioral instincts and the biological nature of cognitive linguistic algorithms, providing a computational representational theory of mind. This in practice means that sentence analysis by linguists is taken as a way to uncover cognitive structures. It is argued that a random genetic mutation in humans has caused syntactic structures to appear in the mind. Therefore, the fact that people have language does not rely on its communicative purposes. For a famous example, it was argued by linguist Noam Chomsky that sentences of the type "is the man who is hungry ordering dinner" are so rare that it's unlikely that children will have heard them. Since they can nonetheless produce them, it was further argued that the structure is not learned but acquired from an innate cognitive language component. generative grammarians then took as their task to find out all about innate structures through introspection in order to form a picture of the hypothesized language faculty. Introspection is the examination of one's own conscious thought, conscious thoughts and feelings. In psychology, the process of introspection relies exclusively on observation of one's mental state, while in spiritual context, it may refer to the examination of one's soul. Introspection is closely related to human self-reflection and self-discovery and is contrasted with external observation. Modularity of mind is the notion that a mind may, at least in part, be composed of innate neural structures or mental modules which have distinct, established, and evolutionarily developed functions. And generative grammar promotes a modular view of the mind, considering language as an autonomous mind module. Thus, language is separated from mathematical logic to the extent that inference plays no role in language acquisition. Other than in linguistics, Chomsky's ideas have been influential in cognitive psychology, computer science, and socialist libertarian thinking. One of the approaches to cognitive linguistics is called cognitive linguistics with capital initials, but it's also often spelled cognitive linguistics with all lowercase letters. This movement saw its beginning in early 1980s when George Lakoff's metaphor theory was united with Ronald Langacker's cognitive grammar, with subsequent models of construction grammar following from various authors. So cognitive grammar is a cognitive approach to language that was developed by Ronald Langacker, which hypothesizes that grammar, semantics, and lexicon exist on a continuum instead of as separate processes altogether. This approach to language was one of the first projects of cognitive linguistics. So cognitive grammar was one of the first projects of cognitive linguistics. In this system, grammar is not a formal system operating independently of meaning, rather is the grammar is itself meaningful and inextricable from semantics. Construction grammar is a similar force of cognitive approaches to grammar. While cognitive grammar emphasizes the study of cognitive principles that give rise to linguistic organization, construction grammar aims to provide a more descriptively and formally detailed account of the linguistic units that comprise a particular language. The union entails two different approaches to linguistic. The union by George Lakoff and Ronald Langacker. So this union, it entails two different approaches to linguistic and cultural evolution. That of the conceptual metaphor and the construction. So this union entails two different approaches to linguistic and cultural evolution. Cultural evolution is an evolutionary theory of social change. It follows from the definition of culture as information capable of affecting individuals' behavior that they acquire from other members of the species through teaching, imitation, and other forms of social transmission. Cognitive linguistics defines itself in opposition to generative grammar, arguing that language functions in the brain according to general cognitive principles. Lakoff's and Langacker's ideas are applied across sciences. So, in addition to linguistics and translation theory, cognitive linguistics with capital initials is influential in literary studies, education, sociology, musicology, computer science, and theology. A conceptual metaphor theory. According to American linguist George Lakoff, metaphors are not just figures of speech, but they are modes of thought. He hypothesizes that principles of abstract reasoning may have evolved from visual thinking and mechanisms for representing spatial relations that are present in lower animals, spatial related to space. Conceptualization is regarded as being based on the embodiment of knowledge, building on physical experience of vision and motion. For example, the metaphor of emotion builds on downward motion, while the metaphor of reason builds on upward motion. So here we have both metaphors, metaphor of emotion and metaphor of reason. In this example, the discussion fell to the emotional level, but I raised it back up to the rational plane. It is argued that language is not a cognitive capacity, but instead it relies on other cognitive skills, which include perception, attention, motor skills, and visual and spatial processing. Same is said of other cognitive phenomena such as the sense of time. In our visual system, we have detectors for motion and detectors for objects or locations, but we don't have detectors for time, whatever that would mean. Thus, it makes a good biological sense that time should be understood in terms of things and motion. In cognitive linguistics, thinking is argued to be mainly automatic and unconscious. Like in neuro-linguistic programming, language is approached via senses. Cognitive linguists study the embodiment of knowledge by seeking expressions which relate to model schemas. For example, in the expression is quarter to 11, the preposition to represents a model schema which is manifested in language as a visual or sensory motoric metaphor. Cognitive and construction grammar. Constructions as the basic units of grammar are conventionalized form, meaning pairing which are comparable to memes as units of linguistic evolution. These are considered multi-layered. For example, idioms are higher level constructions which contain words as middle level constructions, and these may contain morphemes as lower level constructions. It is argued that humans do not only share the same body type, allowing a common ground for embodied representations, but constructions provide commonly ground for uniform expressions within a speech community. Like biological organisms, constructions have a life cycle which is studied by linguists. According to cognitive and constructionist view, there is no grammar in the traditional sense of the word. And what is commonly perceived as grammar is an inventory of constructions, a complex adaptive system, or a population of constructions. Constructions are studied in all fields of language research, from language acquisition to corpus linguistics. There is also a third approach to cognitive linguistics, which neither directly supports the modular nor the anti-modular view of the mind. Modular generative grammar and anti-modular cognitive linguistics with the capital initials we talked before. Proponents of the third view argue that according to brain research, language processing is specialized, although not autonomous from other types of information processing. Language is thought of as one of human cognitive abilities, alongside with perception, attention, memory, motor skills, and visual and spatial processing, rather than being subordinate to them. An emphasis is laid on a cognitive semantics that studies the contextual, conceptual nature of meaning. The specific meaning of cognitive linguistics, the proper address of the name, and the scientific status of the enterprise have been called into question. It is claimed that much of so-called cognitive linguistics fails to live up to its name. So here we have a quote from Bert Peters. It would seem to me that cognitive linguistics is the sort of linguistics that uses findings from cognitive psychology and neurobiology and the like to explore how the human brain produces and interprets language. In other words, cognitive linguistics is a cognitive science, whereas cognitive linguistics is not. I mean, the difference between cognitive linguistics of capital and small initials. Most of generative linguistics, to my mind, is not truly cognitive either. It is suggested that the aforementioned frameworks which make use of the label cognitive are pseudoscience. Pseudoscience means statements or beliefs or practices that are claimed to be both scientific and factual, but they are incompatible with the scientific method. So the statements or the claims which are labeled as cognitive, they are pseudoscience because of two reasons. One, their views of the mind and brain defy basic modern understanding of neuroscience, and second, they are based on scientifically unjustified guru teachings. Guru means what we say in Urdu, guru, same, expert. Members of such frameworks are also said to have used other researchers' findings to present them as their own work. While this criticism is accepted for most part, it's claimed that some of the research has nonetheless produced useful insights. Okay, thank you very much. That's all for our first lecture. You have this assignment. You will write a detailed note on the origin of cognitive linguistics. So the maximum length, or the minimum, let's say minimum length, should be 1000 words for this assignment. Thank you very much. All the best.